Stop the music! Cancel the vows! The words sliced through the church like shattered glass. Amara froze, bouquet trembling in her hands, as her groom stepped aside and pulled another woman forward, draped in crimson silk, smiling like the queen of the moment. Gasps filled the air. Laughter rippled in corners. And then the dagger. She has nothing. Not a name, not a fortune. Nothing. But what the world didn't know was that the bride they mocked carried a truth powerful enough to rewrite every lie. This is the bride left with nothing until she had everything. Comment your city below. The church bells stood tall against the morning sky, polished and proud, ready to announce what should have been the happiest day of her life. Amara had always dreamed of this day, not because she believed in fairy tales, but because she had fought too hard, endured too much, to finally stand in white lace, with her head held high. She wasn't the type born into ease. Her life had been a patchwork of survival, raised by a father who believed in dignity, in work, in keeping one's head high no matter the world's sneers. But when he passed, much of that stability left with him. Still, Amara pressed forward. On the surface, life seemed simple. She worked long hours as an assistant at a small architecture firm, her evenings filled with books and piano keys, the same keys her father once taught her to play. That piano, battered missing ivory on 2 notes, was her anchor. Every note reminded her of his voice. "You are never less than anyone, Amara. Remember that." And yet, beyond the music, the world often tried to prove otherwise. She had felt the sting of whispers in elegant boutiques when she tried on dresses, the sideways glances at restaurants when her fiancé held her hand, the muttered comments about not fitting in, but she smiled through it all. Because Daniel, the man she was about to marry, had once made her believe none of that mattered. His charm had seemed like armor, his wealth like a shield, his promises like a sanctuary. In him, she thought she'd found safety from a world that judged her skin before her soul. And now here she was, slipping into satin shoes, lace veil draped over curls, the bridesmaids fussing around her. Yet beneath the laughter in the dressing room, Amara's chest carried a quiet weight. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was the absence of her father, the man who should have walked her down the aisle. Or maybe it was something deeper, the way Daniel's eyes had lately seemed distant, the way phone calls hushed when she entered the room. She shook it off, convincing herself this was what every bride felt, a cocktail of joy and trembling. The day moved forward in a blur of photographs, flowers, and whispers of congratulations. Guests filled the pews, faces glowing with anticipation. Every detail gleamed. The gold-trimmed invitations, the chandeliers, the music swelling as the organist prepared. But even in this perfection, shadows lurked. Amara caught the glance of one of Daniel's groomsmen, a look that slid too quickly away when she met it. A glance that didn't belong at a celebration of love, and still she pressed on, clutching her bouquet tighter. Because today was supposed to be the beginning of forever. What she didn't know was that this day, the day she thought would crown her with love and belonging, was about to strip everything bare. The heavy church doors opened and Amara stepped forward. The music swelled, the guests rose, and for a moment it seemed like every struggle she had endured melted into this walk down the aisle. Her gown shimmered in the candlelight, her bouquet steady in her hands, though her heart raced like a storm. At the far end stood Daniel, polished in his suit, handsome as ever. But there was something off in his posture, his smile too thin, his gaze flicking not just at her but toward the corner of the room. Still, Amara pressed on, each step carrying the weight of her dreams. She could almost feel her father beside her, invisible but strong, guiding her toward a future she had fought to believe in. But as she neared the altar, Daniel shifted, clearing his throat, his eyes hardening. Then it happened. The music faded, replaced by murmurs. Daniel didn't take her hand. Instead, he turned to the crowd, and with a smirk that sliced like glass, he spoke words no bride should ever hear. "This wedding isn't happening," the church gasped. Amara froze, her bouquet trembling in her grip. Daniel stepped aside. And that's when Amara saw her. A woman in crimson silk, bold and unapologetic, gliding down the aisle as though she owned the place. His mistress. His choice. The woman slipped her arm through his with a smile dripping with triumph, her eyes fixed on Amara with cruel satisfaction. The whispers turned into waves. She left her for her? After all this? On her wedding day? And then came the sting sharper than all, Daniel's voice, low but loud enough for everyone to hear. You thought you could stand here with nothing, Amara. No money, no family, no name worth carrying. Did you really think forever was with you? The words seared her, each syllable designed to strip her of dignity. She felt the weight of 100 eyes, some shocked, some pitying, others smirking, as though her humiliation was entertainment. A black bride abandoned in front of chandeliers and white lilies, a symbol of love turned into a public spectacle of cruelty. Amara's throat burned, her vision blurred, but she refused to collapse. She stood frozen, bouquet clenched, as laughter trickled from a corner. Someone whispered, "What did she expect? Men like Daniel don't stay with women like her." Another voice hissed, "She should have known her place." The venom disguised as whispers pierced deeper than daggers, and still the cruelty piled higher. The mistress leaned toward her with a grin, flashing the diamond bracelet that glittered like a trophy. "Better luck next time," she whispered, though the malice carried to every corner of the room. Amara's knees threatened to buckle, but inside her, something stirred. A voice she had long known. "Her father's, never forget who you are." She clung to it, but the storm around her kept pushing, mocking, trying to drown her in shame. The ceremony was chaos now. Guests shifting uncomfortably, some leaving, some staying to watch the disaster unfold like a scandalous play. Daniel and the mistress basked in the attention, their arrogance unshaken. But even in her humiliation, Amara noticed details. The way the mistress clutched her clutch bag tightly, almost possessively. The way Daniel avoided looking directly at her, as if afraid of something deeper. And the way a certain guest, an older lawyer she recognized from her father's past dealings, watched with knowing eyes, scribbling notes in a folder. The whispers grew into a chorus of judgment. To them, she wasn't a bride anymore, she was a spectacle. And worse, her blackness made her pain a target for uglier thoughts. Someone muttered, "Well, at least he traded up." Another chuckled, "Can you blame him?" The words coiled around her heart like barbed wire. The injustice was clear. She wasn't just abandoned. She was discarded, treated as though her worth was measured only by what she lacked. Her skin, her class, her quiet dignity all mocked in one cruel moment. And yet, in that storm of humiliation, a shift began. The lawyer's eyes, the clutch bag, the fragments of something hidden. Amara didn't know it yet, but the pieces of her life, her father's estate, his legacy, his truth, were about to resurface. For now, though, she stood alone in white lace, broken under chandeliers, with the world watching her ruin. The guests waited for her to collapse, but Amara, trembling, lifted her chin, and that was the moment, just before the storm broke, that the truth began clawing its way to the surface. The air in the church had grown heavy, suffocating, as if every breath carried judgment. Amara stood, abandoned in her wedding dress, the weight of 100 stares pressing down. The mistress clung to Daniel's arm like a prize, her laughter echoing through the silence like cruel bells. And then came the blow that cut deepest. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded paper and held it high. "This," he declared, "is proof she owns nothing. Not the house she lives in, not the car she drives, not even the piano she plays. Everything her father left was already seized. She's been living off scraps." The crowd gasped. Murmurs filled the air, some pitying, others mocking. Someone muttered, "So she was really just a charity case." Another whispered, "Of course." Nothing of her own. The mistress stepped forward, lifting her chin with venomous pride. From her clutch bag, she produced a set of documents, deeds, accounts, proof, or so it seemed, that every shred of Amara's inheritance had been claimed, and not by her. "See?" The mistress smirked, waving the papers. She was nothing but a girl playing princess in a borrowed dress. The humiliation crashed over Amara like a tidal wave. Her father's name dragged into the dirt. Her life reduced to ashes. The sting wasn't just personal. It was racial, systemic, generational. To them, she wasn't a bride with a legacy. She was just another black woman with nothing. A figure they could laugh at, dismiss, erase. Her hands shook. Her knees weakened. For a moment, it seemed she might collapse under the weight of betrayal and injustice. The whispers grew louder, feeding on her silence, painting her as powerless. But then a voice broke through, calm, firm. The lawyer she had noticed earlier stood up, papers in hand, his expression sharp as steel. "That's interesting," he said, his voice carrying over the gasps. "Because these documents you wave so proudly are forgeries." The room froze. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the mistress. "I was the executor of her father's estate. I know every line, every figure. And I know exactly who signed these papers under false pretenses." All eyes turned to the mistress, her face drained of color, the confidence cracking like glass under heat. Amara's chest heaved, the world spinning. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was theft. The very legacy her father had left her had been stolen, paraded, and mocked before her eyes. The storm of humiliation had reached its peak. And now, the lightning was about to strike. "Dear audience, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments." The silence after the lawyer's words was deafening. The mistress clutched the forged documents tighter, her face pale as the truth unraveled. Security was called, and within moments, the woman who had mocked Amara was being escorted out. Her protests drowned in the murmurs of a crowd that had turned against her, and Daniel, his mask of arrogance, crumbled. The man who had paraded his betrayal so proudly was left exposed, his fortune built on deceit, his future unraveling with every whisper of scandal. He reached for Amara, perhaps hoping for forgiveness, perhaps for a shred of dignity. But she didn't move. She didn't need to, because in that moment, Amara was no longer the abandoned bride. She was the heir to her father's billion-dollar legacy, the rightful owner of the estate, the name, the dignity that others had tried to strip away. The very piano she once played in solitude was now a symbol not of loss, but of survival, a melody of resilience rising above humiliation. The guests who had laughed, who had whispered about her worth, now watched in silence. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others stared in awe. But for Amara, it was no longer about them. It was about reclaiming her father's name, his sacrifices, his dreams, and proving that her value had never been tied to Daniel's approval or society's shallow judgments. This was more than a wedding gone wrong. It was a mirror held up to the world. How often are black women dismissed, underestimated, treated as less, until the truth forces the world to see what was there all along? Amara's humiliation was born not just of betrayal, but of a system that measures worth through skin, wealth, and status. And yet, in the face of it, she rose. Her story reminds us, dignity can be mocked, but it cannot be stolen. Legacy can be hidden, but it cannot be erased. Strength may be silenced, but it cannot be destroyed. Amara walked out of that church not as a bride abandoned, but as a woman reborn. Her veil no longer symbolized innocence. It symbolized resilience. Her father's words echoed once more. "You are never less than anyone, Amara." And perhaps that is the question this story leaves us with. How many more Amaras must be humiliated before the world stops doubting their worth? Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply standing tall when the world expected you to fall. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.